Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to yet another video, folks. Today we're predicting Premier League Week 27 for football. But last weekend we saw Arsenal lost to West Ham. Who saw that coming? Liverpool were victorious against Manchester City in the weekend. But let's get this let's get this one underway. Before we get into the channel, hit the subscribe button and give you about 90,000 likes, and it's free to do. But let's start with the South Coast derby, Brighton versus Bournemouth. But after winning at the South Coast derby at the weekend, Brighton Hove Albion heading into another South Coast rivalry as the top four chasing AFC Bournemouth head to the Amex Stadium this week. But after losing 7-0 to Nottingham Forest at the King City ground to the start of February, but pressure grew significantly on Brighton Hove Albion boss Fabian Hürzeler from large swaths of Brighton supporters. But the Seagulls have turned their form around, but as they chase for the UEFA competition qualification once again. They defeated Chelsea in the fourth round of the FA Cup before then hammering the same opposition in the league, and now coming into this one on the back of a 4-0 demolition of Southampton at St Mary's at the weekend. For the first time in a few months, AFC Bournemouth coming into this one on the back of a performance and a result, and that was ligaments disappointingly underwhelming as they suffered a 1-0 defeat at home to struggling Wolverhampton Wanderers on the other day. But the Cherries will Adeo as the helm implementing as aggressive playing style of football remain well in contention for a top 5 or top 4 top 5 spot in the Champions League and the Champions League qualification, despite that being their second defeat in their last 3 league games. So Brighton, as mentioned, hammered Southampton on the other day. Will believe they have an absolute steady the ship as they intend to propel themselves back into the European spots in the last few months of the campaign. But Bournemouth will not be too worried by their defeat to Wolves on the other day, but will themselves to be keen to bounce back to a similar degree of Brighton's desire for control and to dominate possession up against Bournemouth's side, keen on stealing the ball high and playing with a high press. Means this is a good matchup for a potentially fun to watch at the Amex Stadium. I'm going Brighton 2, Bournemouth 1. Right, let's move up to... let's move up to Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa. Crystal Palace just coming on the back of a 2-0 2-0 win over Fulham away at Craven Cottage. But as for Aston Villa, they had a much needed win against Chelsea. But this one is a tough one to call. This one has draw written all over it, but I'm going for a 2-2 draw. And then Wolves versus Fulham. Of course, Wolves just coming on the back of a 1-0 defeat. A 1-0 win against Bournemouth, I would say, despite Bournemouth going down to 10 men. And Fulham were coming on the back of a 2-0 defeat at the hands of Crystal Palace. But I'm going for a Wolves win to win 2-1. And then Chelsea versus Southampton. Chelsea's form has been a little bit rotten recently. Yeah, Oliver Glasner's Crystal Palace are firmly in the middle of the table in the Premier League, but as the Seagulls now prepared to take on Aston Villa's side have enjoyed a positive 7 days. Crystal Palace managed to pull themselves into the top half of the Premier League last season before starting this season quite slowly. However, the Seagulls has been generally strong for a few months now, but as they edge back towards the top 10. But the home team coming into this one on the back of an impressive performance at Craven Cottage against European chasing Fulham on the other day, with a 2-0 victory courtesy of German Anderson own goal, but as well as strike from Daniel Mures. But Aston Villa has been inconsistent throughout the campaign, but they have been able to put in impressive performances, raising their game against so-called bigger and better sides in both. And the Premier League on continuing after a 2-2 draw with Champions Elite Liverpool at Villa Park last weekend. But Villains once again came from behind at the weekend to defeat Chelsea by 2-1 thanks to a second half brace scored by the winter transfer window signing of Marco Senseo. Crystal Palace have been dealing with key injury issues throughout the campaign, but as well as enduring like a couple of jubilant transfer windows. But the Eagles have players have now returned and more settled to look at them ahead of the final few months. But Aston Villa, on the other hand, are in the middle of the relentless schedule, but that will only contend with the return of the Champions League for the Villains next week. But siding with Palace, given their home advantage, but would appear a solid bet for this one. But I'm going for a 2-2 draw. Wait 1 minute. Okay. Right. Okay. Need to fill. And yeah. Wolverhampton Wanderers earned a potentially pivotal win at the weekend to move away from the bottom three as they now welcome a frustrated Fulham side to the Molineux this week. So in mid-December, Wolverhampton Wanderers look to the decision to replace Gary O'Neill's and Victor Piore results immediately to improve before driving, though performances have been reminded much improved, that they coming into this one on the back of a vital victory. Away at the Invitality Stadium against the Champions League chasing AFC Bournemouth. But at the weekend, Wolves took advantage of Bournemouth going down to 10 men and in the first half of defeating the Cherries by a 1-0 thanks to Matheus Cunha winner. But Marco Silva's Fulham will believe they have the quality and depth to finish in the top 8 and the European spots in the Premier League this season. But the Cottagers have been left down by the occasional lacklustre performance at home, and that happened again at the weekend. But the Cottagers have won 3 of their previous 4 matches before welcoming Crystal Palace to West London the other day, but suffering a 2-0 loss at home to the Seagulls due to Jonathan Anderson's own goal, but then a strike from Daniel Muris. Wolverhampton Wanderers have opened up a 5-point gap between themselves and the bottom 3 and relegation places in the Premier League. They'll be confident of extending that in the final, but a couple of months ago on the campaign, Fulham need to bounce back at Molineux this week, and with the possibility of playing on the counter-attack, more likely they may well be more suited of this match. However, given their in general improvement and home advantage, siding with Wolves remains the way to go for this one. I'm going for Wolves to win 2-1. Right, next up, Chelsea. Next up, Chelsea versus Southampton. Chelsea have collapsed in the last couple of months and now face a real fight to back-to-back Champions League spots as the Blues now faced off bottom of the table Southampton. And Chelsea coming into this one of a 2-1 defeat to Aston Villa at Villa Park but at the weekend. But the Blues took the lead in the 9th minute via Enzo Fernandez before the second half, and braced by Marco Sessao turned the game on its head to continue their poor form. Enzo Maresco's side have now suffered 3 successive defeats across all competitions, and they have managed just 3 wins in 12 matches, and those wins come at home to West Ham United or Wolverhampton Wanderers and League Two strugglers Morecambe. But Ivan Juric replaced Russell Martin in mid-December, but Southampton got closer to overtaking Derby County's record lowest points tally in the Premier League history of 11 points. But they are simply going through the motions and before their relegation is confirmed. But the Saints coming into this one of a 4-0 hammering at the hands of Brian O'Vallion at St Mary's last weekend, and due to goals from Gino Pedro and Jomio Ruta, Kuro Montina and Jack Hillshowood, but they have now conceded 61 goals in 26 games. Chelsea appeared as far more dysfunctional and confused than they were in the first half of the campaign. They seemed to be as though Maresca had developed as cushion, and that was at odds. But overall running of the club and construction of their squad, they now face a Southampton side though that they are just tonic, but when are going through a trot and a comfortable win, it remains likely at Stamford Bridge this week. Right, next up, let's move on to Wednesday now. Right. Come on, mate. Load up. Right, Brentford versus the Infield sides, Brentford and Everton, going head to head at the G-Tech Community Stadium in the Premier League on Wednesday. But Brentford enjoying a thumping 4-0 win over Leicester on Friday, and to bluster their chances of European football, while Everton were impressive once again, despite failing to see out their clash with Manchester United on the following day. But Moyes has won both away games since taking charge of Everton's against challenging mid-table, opponents, and Everton will prove a similar, test with the hosts are now dreaming of Europe. A win for either side would be important in moving them up the table, but it was like a very tough one to call. But both in excellent form, but a draw could well be the most likely outcome. But I'm going for Brentford to win 2-1. Right, Manchester United versus Ipswich. Manchester United will be looked to arrest a woeful run of home form, but when they welcome relegation favourites Ipswich Town to Old Trafford in the Premier League on Wednesday. But the Ipswich were thrashed again at the weekend, but edged them closer towards an instant return to the Championship, while Man United were unfortunate to leave Goodison Park with a point in the game against Everton mid in controversial. But Ipswich coming on of a 4-1 defeat to Spurs. Right, Man United flattered to the seas once again at the weekend. With their form, it's even worse at home, but this would be the biggest shock yet against the clubs distant for the drop. But Amaron's men should have just enough. But Ipswich have only kept one clean sheet on the road this season, but that came in the goalless draw with Brighton early in the campaign, and they will need to have their scoring shooting boots on, but they are to have any chance in this one. But even though they may not be enough for the Tractor Boys, but I'm going for United to win 3-0. Yeah, Nottingham Forest versus Arsenal. After suffering potentially the biggest blow yet to their Premier League hopes of glory, Arsenal bid to keep their increasingly thin chances alive when they tackle high-flying Nottingham Forest at the City Ground on Wednesday. But the Gunners travel, January transfer gamble, but backfired again in Saturday's 1-0 derby loss to West Ham United. But their lost host also scrambled to defeat at game week 26, coming out on the wrong end of a 4-3 scoreline at Newcastle United. At Newcastle, Forest's defeats catastrophic at Newcastle should be a little bit bearing on Wednesday's game, and given the fact that Santo's men are back in their City Ground fortress, but they are facing an Arsenal side that they are far less disrupted attack. But if the weekend is anything to go by, but the Gunners are statistically still the best defence in the league, but they might not have too much trouble keeping their host at bay. But if Santo does indeed go rear guard heavy, but their rage attack should come short once again. But a frustrating 0-0 draw could all spell the end of their title charge. But I predicted like a 1-1 draw. Right, Spurs against Manchester City. A slice of English football history is on the line for Tottenham Hotspur on Wednesday evening. But when Ange Postecoglou's men host Premier League champions Manchester City in the pick of their midweek fixtures, but having already slammed the Citizens twice while defeating Manchester United 3 times in 2024-25, Spurs could become the third